Okay, this one is also. She's on.
Okay, sure. And now it's getting both of us, so when this inevitably doesn't work.
Oh, I guess I should actually. Okay, that should be.
Are you good? Did I cut your candy break too short?
No.
Okay, great. Hi, Noelle.
Hello, Emily.
How's it going?
Good.
Good. So I could talk about the Catholic Church forever. So I would love to hear about your experience with that growing up.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten to 7th grade. It was pretty small. There was like 25 kids in my class, and I'd known them the whole time. I didn't really think about anything outside of that because that's just what I grew up with, and those were all of my friends. And then you go to like church on Sunday, and it's all the same people at church. So that was just very much my whole world. And then I would say like mainly a good experience school-wise. I think that there's like a lot to be said for Catholic guilt and the way that Catholic guilt specifically like intersects with like growing up as a girl is a weird thing, especially if you have like a mom who really, I feel like looking back, a lot of the things that my mom did were meant positively, but like didn't always have, like my mom was really into like the like, oh, it's okay, real women have curves, like those kind of like platitudes where it's like meant to make you feel better but actually like isn't necessarily healthy. I feel like Catholicism and guilt and my mom's own anxieties like all kind of got wrapped up together and gave me this very weird upbringing and like weird conception of myself. And then in 7th grade I was very, very, very badly bullied, and it was pretty traumatizing because a lot of it kind of stemmed from the person who had been like my best friend for that entire time, and like our families went on vacation together, like we were family friends, and then this like just kind of whole nonsense thing, like our parents were fighting and then we were fighting, and like but he was like the cool kid and like I had turned into like this really giant weird tomboy who was like huge teacher's pet and just like a giant nerd, and everyone's like as soon as that split I was like the easy person to just like
Pile everything on.
So then like these kids that I had like the only people I knew in my life and like the people I had grown up with since I was 5, all of a sudden I was like total social pariah. Like remember there was one moment where like the other girl who was also like pretty uncool dropped her book bag in the hallway and all of her papers spilled, so I kneeled down to help her and she was like, I don't want to be seen like having you help me like pick up my papers. And this was like the other like dumped on kid.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, wow. So I left and I went to public school, and it was great. And way more like liberal first of all, but also way more diverse. And it was like, I don't know, we didn't really talk about like public school growing up. I just knew that like I was going to Catholic school because that's what would make me like the smartest and the best, and like that's where if you're smart and you're the best, you go to Catholic school because it's better. And I just like didn't conceive of public school at all, like just wasn't in my like vocabulary. And then going there I was like, oh wait, this is great, and like so, everyone's weird.
So was it a big deal for your family to make that decision? Like who pushed that to start out with?
Kind of everyone, because like my parents were super involved in kind of all the nonsense that went on, because that's how like weird and like incestuous I feel like that tiny Catholic school was. Like the parents were all involved, the kids were involved, sometimes I feel like less so because of things that they felt and more so because of like things that their parents had said. And I think actually like the school counselor had brought it up to me. She was like, maybe you should like change schools. And I was like, oh, I didn't even
think about that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I should maybe do that. So yeah, it was like as soon as that became an option, my whole family like really glommed onto it. We're like, oh, that would probably be good because like I could probably So I think it took me a while to kind of trust people again, but I met some really good people, like my first day of high school. First day,
Yeah.
I met the person who is now my partner of 9 years. We met in a class and like ate lunch together.
Oh my
And
God.
so like I feel like learning to trust people again was good, but I think it also gave me like a good sense of myself.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know how other people deal with bullying, but like I saw it happening to me and I was like, okay, but like I'm great. I'm like funny, I'm really creative, really smart. I don't really see what the problem with me is. Like it seems
Yeah.
like a them problem. I always conceived of it as not a me problem, as like this is other people being shitty.
Yeah.
And I didn't take it personally. It just hurt.
Yeah.
So I feel like it didn't super affect like my sense of self. I was like, I'm still cool and great, so I'll just find people who think that also. And then as soon as I found those people, it was like, okay. But I knew I had been through like shitty stuff before and that I would be okay. And I think it also kind of gave me like a lack of embarrassment about like, we were talking in the car about like making friends as adults.
Yeah.
Which is something I've had to go through like after graduating college and then like waiting a few years and like sticking around town and working and then moving to Canada, like learning to make adult friends is kind of difficult, but I've kind of like lost that like shame
Yeah.
and embarrassment. So I have like no problem being like, hey, you seem really cool. Like I would like to be your friend.
Yeah.
Will you be my friend? It sounds so silly to like say it
But-
like that, but like I have no perceived sense of like coolness. Like I don't care about coming
Yeah.
off as like eager or like dorky. And I feel like in the States that's I feel like teacher's pet and like kind of overly eager and like even like brown noser kind of get used a lot, and those have kind of negative connotations. But in Canada they have this term called keener. Just you're really keen, you're
Yeah.
like really eager, and it's not a negative word. Like it's kind of like something that you might use to like poke fun at someone, like,
Yeah.
oh, they're such a keener, but it's not negative. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is what I am. I see. Everyone always called me a teacher's pet, but I feel like teacher's pet like do things on purpose to like suck up. And like that wasn't me. I just
Yeah.
really loved it. I'm just an enthusiastic person. And I felt like there was never a word that described it. And I was like, oh, keener. You're great. You're
Yeah.
eager. You don't like have a ton of sense of shame because like I know who I am and I feel very strong in that. So like if other people are like turned off because they think I'm like too enthusiastic or too forward or have too much energy or too dorky, I'm like, okay, your loss.
Yeah. And
Whatever.
do you think it becomes easier as you get older and to have a better sense of yourself?
For sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've gotten more direct in that. Like my best friend that I made in Canada, I met her, I was working at a poutine restaurant, and it was like
That's like the most Canada
it was the
thing.
most Canada thing ever, and it was the worst. My boss was from Quebec, and he just like screamed at us in French and like told us that we were like fat and ugly all the time. Like it was like really bad. But we met each other there, and like I feel like our friendship was really fortified on that. Like, wow, our
Yeah.
shitty job sucks so much.
Yep.
But first day I met her, I was like, she's really cool. I want to be her friend. And so every day after work, I'd be like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Or like, hey, what are you doing later? And she thought I was just being friendly, so she would just answer. She'd be like, oh, I'm just going home later. And I'd be like, oh, cool. Yep. And then finally, I think about a week, 2 weeks of that, and she was like locking up. We had just finished our shift, and she turned around, and I was standing there waiting. And I was like, do you not want to be my friend? And I like said those words out loud. And she was like, no, I do, you're just like really friendly. And I was like, no, I've been trying to be your friend.
Yeah.
Like, this is me courting you. I think I said that, like, I'm courting you. Please, like, do you want to go for brunch tomorrow? Like, let's make that plan. And she was like, okay, weirdo. And then, yeah, we became best friends.
That's awesome.
I feel like you have to like go be clear, because so many people are, and I feel like so much of our society is based around like playing games or like, oh, don't text him after within 3 days. Like there's all these like rules about, I feel like a lot of it is how to keep your mask on, like how to still be perceived as cool. But if you don't care about being perceived as cool, you can just get right to the point.
Yeah. So what do you think, because I feel the same way, that it's sort of a double-edged sword of everybody gets my personality.
Mhm.
And sometimes I don't think it's necessarily always a better thing, because I have trouble like sort of maintaining strong boundaries sometimes, and also like if I ever get rejected, I know it's because of who I am, right?
Yeah.
So, but not everybody has that trait. Do you have a sense of where it came from?
My mom always blames it on the fact that I did competitive Irish dancing from the ages 5 to 15.
Oh, that's incredible.
And you have to like, it's interesting because a lot of dance, like you take your classes together in a group, and you'll often like do performances around the city in a group, but in competitions you compete as a solo person. And you're surrounded by like all of your friends and all of your classmates, but then you like come out one by one and you compete individually. And I loved that.
Yeah.
I thrived on that. And it's not one by one, it's 2 by 2. But if there's an odd number of people in your competition and you go last, you get to go by yourself. So I would fight girls to be the last because I wanted to be the last one.
Yeah.
Everyone's watching. So I'm not sure if that was something that was co-constructed, or I was drawn to it because that's already who I was, or if that really brought on that characteristic in me. But my mom says it's like having to, compete in a ballroom in front of 500 people and
Yeah.
fighting to be like, I want to be the one on the stage by myself so everyone can see how great I am. That really.
And I feel like a lot of people are like that when you said you started when you were 5. A lot of people are like that when they're 5, but it's maintaining it up through adulthood, right?
Uh-huh.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that in combination with like being bullied and then somehow miraculously like not letting that affect my
Yeah.
self-esteem, and then going into high school and having like a really good experience. Like I did the IB program, like I did art. I was a huge theater kid, like not surprisingly. Just like a big artsy, keener
Yeah.
weirdo. And I feel like as soon as I found other people who were also like that, that was really great because I never needed other people to like confirm like you're an artistic person, you're a smart person. Like I felt all those things. I didn't need like the group for that, but I always wanted a group.
Yeah.
And like after having like a counselor tell you like you should probably leave the school, I just wasn't sure if I was gonna get that. And then as soon as I found like all the other weirdos, I was like,
Yeah.
let me hoard you.
And did that carry through to college?
College was interesting. I majored in comparative literature. There were only 12 people in my major. It was super niche, super academic, super like froofy, weirdo, in your head. Like I loved it.
Yeah.
It was the best. And I took a lot of really interesting classes, but I also graduated in 3 years, so I was like really taking as many classes as I could, and I was generally working like 2 jobs at a time during that also. And then I also lived with my partner. We moved in together when we were 18. It's like, we moved in together immediately, freshman year of college. So we always had each other. So it was, I feel like I didn't foster as much community as I wanted during college because I was doing like 500 other things.
Yeah.
But as soon as I graduated, I wanted to go to grad school immediately because I was like, that's what smart kids do. I'm a smart kid, so I should go to grad school. And my favorite professor sat me down and was like, you should take some time in the real world, figure your shit out, like what do you want to actually do? He was like, and honestly, like a lot of people, especially for PhD programs, are going to be looking for people that already have their major or their master's. And like the specific thing that he said to me that like is burned in my head forever is, he was like, if you go to grad school now and like let's say you get a PhD in comparative literature, you spend 7 years probably on this really niche topic no one else cares about, just you, and that's great. then you're overqualified for every job other than being a professor, and let's be honest, there's not enough professor jobs out there, and you're probably not gonna ever get tenure even if you do become a professor. And then he said, you will become a 30-year-old baby with no real skills. And I was like, and this is my favorite professor. And he loved me. And I went into his office hours thinking like he was gonna be like, oh, well, you're so smart, definitely go to grad school. I'll write you that recommendation letter. And I was like, and then I sat down and that's the talk I got. And I was like, yeah, what? What do I do with that information? Like that was not in my life plan at all.
Wait, do you think he saw himself as a 30-year-old man baby?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
A 30-year-old baby, I'm sorry, I added the man baby.
He was like, all my other friends didn't become comparative literature professors. They all became lawyers and had more experiences in the real world. He goes, they're making 3 times as much money as me. They're less stressed out and they don't have to worry about getting tenure. And why didn't I do that? Don't do what I did. Like, if you want to get a PhD in comparative literature in 5 years, like, talk to me then. He's like, but dude, and I had graduated a year early. I was 21. He was like, you're not going into I'm not going to let you go into a PhD program at 21. No. And I was like, okay.
Whoa.
Got to reconsider here. And then I felt kind of lost. It's like,
Yeah.
well, now what do I do? Like, that was my whole, I didn't even know what I wanted to get a PhD in comparative literature for. I just knew that, like, I loved being in school. I loved thinking about things. Everything makes me want to, like, write an essay. I watch, like, a really campy, bad TV show, and I'm like, I want to write an essay about that. Like, it's just how my brain is all the time.
Yeah.
And so not having that as, like, an option was just, like, a delayed adulthood. Because he was totally right.
Yeah.
It was just delayed adulthood for me. Like, I don't know what I want to do with it, but, like, that just seems like the next step. So I'd really consider what I wanted to do. And that led me to social work, so I'm glad that that happened. But, like, it was a shock to the system. I feel like that was the first time, not when I was, like, bullied.
Yeah.
But, like, this was the first time that I had to, like, reconsider who I was, and I didn't feel sure about that anymore for the first time.
Yeah. So what did you do when you graduated?
I'd had a job since my freshman year in college working at the Accessible Education Center, working as a transcriptionist for students with disabilities, but I mainly worked with deaf and hard of hearing students, and so I would sit in on their classes with them. I could type like 140 words a minute using my, like, the special program. So, and whatever I typed on my screen, like, they would share the screen, so like wherever they were sitting in the class, it would pop up. So I would like live closed caption the class essentially.
Cool.
And just whatever classes they took, that's what I would take. And a bunch of my students, after I graduated, it turns out, like right when I graduated, I got a bunch of students who were all majoring in family and human services. And so I had to sit in on all of their classes, and I think I was working with 3 or 4 different students, all of whom were majoring in this, and they were doing different focuses. So I got to take literally every class that that major offers, and it was really, really transformative because I like hadn't considered that a career. Like, I don't know what I was like, you could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like our generation people weren't great at telling millennials what you could be. They were like, lawyer, doctor, journalist, maybe, like, there weren't that many options, and social worker had just never occurred to me. Especially even like when someone said social worker, like I didn't even entirely know what that meant, and definitely it didn't mean what it actually is. So actually sitting in on those classes, I was like, oh, whoa, okay, this feels good. Because what I really loved about comparative literature was like English classes, there would often be like 18th century literature, and then you'd read a bunch of stuff from that. But like comparative literature classes, one of my classes was hegemonic masculinity during times of war. And so we read everything from like Othello to like watching Beyonce music videos to like watching some obscure Brazilian film to like reading poetry that was written in the trenches in World War I.
Do you just fantasize about coming up with those syllabuses now?
Yes. Yes, that's my whole like every time I watch like Riverdale, for example, bad show, but good, but bad. And I am interested in how it does that and how visual cues on screen and what references they're making kind of construct this like high camp experience that toes the line perfectly between horrible and the best. And I want to like make a whole syllabus about that. And that's what I'm thinking of all the time. Like my brain is just, I just need to like make lists and write things down and analyze and sort. And
Yeah.
I was always told that my brain like works weird and different than other people's. Like I felt like when you were talking about how the one infamous professor, and how they're like, because A, B, C, then of course D.
Yeah.
But that would never be me. I would be like A, F, G, X.
Yeah.
Duh. And everyone else is like, wait, how did you get there?
Yeah.
And it, in comparative literature, that's the whole structure of it, is like everything's a mess. Find your way through the mess, and whatever path you create is a legitimate path because you thought of it. It's like, let's get some evidence to like back it up. Go watch some more music videos. Like it was so validating.
Yeah.
And so that was really, but what I really loved about that class is that it would really combine like all of these different forms of media and then philosophy, but also always with the base of talking about like systems of oppression, like structural systems, and there was always like this really heavy like societal base to it. And I felt like I wanted to do something to like help the world, but I didn't know what that was. And I was like, my main good skills are like being positive, writing essays, and thinking about things. So like, what do you do with that? Which is why I thought lawyer for a little bit. I considered law school for a while. And I was like, I'm not entirely sure that that's the best way to do that. And I think that's why I wanted to do a PhD. I was like, if I just do more thinking, then maybe something good will come out of it. And my professor was pretty much like, well, no, go in the real world and find stuff. And my real world job was like working in human services. And in my real world job, I was taking social work classes every day.
Yeah.
And it's like one day I remember put 2 to 2 together, and it just hit me for the first time. And I remember just coming home, my partner, and just like sobbing for like 2 hours. And I was like, oh, I figured it out.
Yeah. That's
Took forever.
Awesome. I feel like lawyer is just the thing that it's like if you're smart but not at science, that's what you're supposed to do.
Like you're smart and you can read stuff, lawyer. But like the criminal justice system is like my main interest here, and it's so messed up. And I feel like a not small amount of that is because like we just push like a lot of wealthy white people who think that they're really smart into this position because it like had a lot of prestige, and then they're like in charge of dealing with mainly people in poverty who are people of color and like deciding their fates. And like that's not a good way to set up the system. But because it's like the doctor, lawyer, it's like one of those things, like a lot of people get funneled into that. But do they care about like human rights? Do they care about social justice? Like
are you an anomaly amongst your friends for caring about those things? Like I'm thinking about your friends from like growing up or your family or anything like that.
Well, I don't talk to anybody from like before I was 13, and then like the 3 people I met on my first day of high school that I ate lunch with, one of whom is my longtime partner, and the other 2 are my 2 best friends who I still like talk to on a daily basis. So I feel like they're good, and ever since, I feel like especially since moving to Canada, I made a conscious effort to like, I'm like a fairly dramatic person, and I have like very strong rules with myself, and like once I decide something, like that's a rule I made myself. And so I only wanted to take on friends who I felt like were also cared about the things that I cared about. And so the nice thing about being very direct with your friendships and being like, hello, will you be friends with me, is that you only do that to the people you actually want to be actual friends with. So I didn't gather like a ton of like acquaintances that I like didn't necessarily align with. Like I was very strategic in like who I wanted to be friends with, and I think that they aligned with me because I like chose them on purpose.
So if you don't mind my asking sort of like about how did you sort of build a relationship when you meet someone when you're in your teenage years? And I think that you changed so much during that time.
It was really interesting. We became best friends like immediately, like that whole group of guys that I met that are still like my best friends today. We just really got along, and we were just best friends until like towards the end of our senior year. Where I feel like I hadn't like had really a relationship, like I felt really unattractive and weird. I feel like Catholicism and weird guilt and weird mom trying to be helpful about like real women have curves, like all gave me this really weird conception of myself in which like, and one friend told me, and this really sticks, she told me that my body shape was a sin. Not like what I did with my body, because at that point I was like 16 and still had never kissed anyone, but she told me my body shape was a sin because I have like big boobs and a butt, and I've like got like an hourglass figure. And she was like, well, that's your cross to bear. And then she told me that like you can be certain that if any guy does like you, it won't be for the right reasons. And like real guys who like have strong moral character won't like you because of that, because like you're a temptress, because of like the shape of my body. So I got this really weird conception that like I knew I liked myself. Like I thought that I was pretty, and I thought that I really liked myself as a person, but I thought that if anyone else thought I was pretty, they must be a bad person. And if anyone did like my personality, they like inherently couldn't be attracted to me, which I think is why it took so long for Paul and I to like get together, because like it was like, oh, we're like best friends.
Yeah.
Like he can't be attracted to me because I'm just like, it's a weird thing where like I didn't feel necessarily like unattractive. I was just convinced other people found me unattractive.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's all
It's all-
Catholicism's fault.
Yeah.
It's all up in there. All the weird body shamey sin, but having like morality placed upon your body shape, something that you can't help. Like not like you're
what are
going
you supposed
around.
to do about that?
You literally can't do anything. So that was looking back, it's interesting. I've realized how many misconnections there were when like people were like openly trying to date me, and I straight up didn't see it because I was like, but we're friends, or like, but they're nice to me, therefore they can't like me. So Paul and I didn't start dating until our senior year towards the end, and we took it really slow. We have like one of those like stupid cute stories, like we left notes in each other's locker every day for 5 months, but then like they turned from like notes into like full on letters, and then we were like we were in love like before we'd even held hands. Like I told him in letters first, like then we talked about that for like months in letters. We never talked about it in real life. We just were like, I think because like if he ever was like, oh, I don't actually feel that way, it's just a joke, it's just in letters, I could be like, oh yeah, same. So we just continued being buds, but what meanwhile like dropping 4-page letters in each other's lockers that like talked about like what we want out of life and how in love we were with each other. So finally we just had to like be adults and be like, and say it in real life, and then we've been together ever since. And so that's been an interesting experience because we've always had each other, and we just really lucked out that we're super compatible, and we've gone through like college and graduating, and like we've luckily kept a lot of our same friends, like our 2 other best friends from high school that he's known since even longer than that. Like we're still best friends with them, and we've really kind of complement each other well. But like, I mean, we moved to Canada, I realized I was queer, like all of these things, and like we just always really had each other's back, so I just got really lucky. But it is an interesting thing, because I think that there's definitely a time in college where I like didn't go out and make connections because I knew that I just had him at home and that was okay and that was safe, so you didn't need to go out. And that's what changed in Canada, is like he was doing his master's program, like that's why we moved there. So we're in the middle of Alberta, and it's similar to like Anchorage in that there's like, Canada is so big, but it's so unpopulated that there's just like a city. So Edmonton's like the 4th biggest city in all of Canada, but it only had 1 million people. But that makes it the 4th biggest city in the whole country, and it's just like there and then nothing. Just wilderness for 5 hours in every direction. So he was off doing research a lot of times in the field. And I was like, great, okay, now I'm in this country, don't know anyone, I have to like go make my own friends, versus we always had friends together. Like any friend of his was automatically a friend of mine. Someone he met in a class became my friend too, because we were just like on pair, and this was the first time that I had to like interact with the world as not part of a pair, and I think that that was super healthy.
Yeah.
And I don't think I realized that I needed that until after it happened. And I was like, oh fuck, I could have been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Being your own person is nice. Because I think I felt like a weird guilt thing, like that if I did go off and like meet my own friends and have my own social group, that somehow meant that I like didn't love him as much. And that seemed scary to investigate. So you might as well just stay at home.
Yeah, I mean, like, your relationships are enormous parts of your identity when you're in high school. So, like, maintaining those relationships, I think you end up with that same mentality. I definitely have friends from being very, very young that it's like this relationship, there's something about this relationship itself that's important rather than like what this person, like, because you and I are not really the same anymore. But yeah, those relationships, I'm glad that it was exciting and not scary to go out on your own like that.
It was definitely partly scary, but I try to go towards things with a positive attitude, and if I don't like something, I can just stop or change it, or like, I know I have enough like tools in my toolkit to like change a situation that ends up being bad, so I just had to like go, so I was doing the same transcription job over Skype, working from home for like the first year, like 9 months that we lived in Canada, so I didn't know anybody. And then I like took on a part-time job at like an ice cream place, but I ended up only having one coworker, so I was like, great, I still don't know anybody, so I had to quit both of those things and be like, I need a job that's purely to meet people. Like, I love food service, and I feel like there's this really weird thing between like really academic people who are like, oh, you're better than that. And I'm like, no one's better than this. This is a real life job that lots of people do. And lots of the people there are just as smart as you fancy people. But like they're doing, like there's a lot of thoughts about the way that people treat people who purposely do food service, or people who like can't get out of food service for a variety of reasons, and it's really looked like down upon. But I was like, you know what, I need to do something with my hands, I need to meet people, I need to be interacting with people. I love working food service, I think it's really fun. I love working like on the line, I love working in a kitchen. So I applied for the poutine job.
I did that in college, I love it so much.
It's like really, really satisfying. You like have all your orders, my brain's like working a million miles a minute, and like doing like 10 orders at once, like while you're on the line. I feel like that's, my brain functions nicely there, having to do 20 things at once, because I feel like it already is. So I was like, this is for me. And that's where I met my best friend Caitlin, and that just really jump-started like the best 3 years of my life, like hands down. Well, 2 years, because like the first year in Canada was, I just stayed at home and it was cold and it was sad. But the last 2 years I was there were like the best times of my life.
That's awesome.
And I feel like that was because I had to like go out, make my own community on purpose, and be intentional about who I was spending my time with. Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier. This is also me. I have a lot of thoughts. But I have like strict rules for myself, so when I was like, okay, you need to like make friends on purpose that you really like, I also made a bunch of rules for myself because I moved right in the middle of the primaries. And so like that was a really weird time to be moving to a new country. And everything felt, and then like the election happened and everything was just really scary. It was really weird to not be in your country when like your country's turning into a fascist state. Like it was odd. I did not enjoy that part of it, and people kept being like, oh, but like you're safe and good here, and like Canada's awesome, and I'm like, okay, like number one, I've got some things to say about Canada, but number two, like everyone I care about in the marginalized communities that I'm a part of and that I care about are going through things, and like I can't, not being there felt really bad. So to like help my mental state, I just made a rule for myself that I wasn't going to consume any media by straight white men. So that included podcasts, books, movies,
Yeah.
TV shows. I was like, if it's starring a straight white man or written by a straight white man or anything like that, like, no. That's
Yeah.
just like a hard no. So I've never seen Game of Thrones.
That's the one big consequence. I had to
Which
say.
people like
It's not-
get really intense about, which I then like, because I'm a contrarian. I love when men get upset at me about having not seen Game of Thrones. Like, oh, but it's really good. I'm like, cool, great. Go watch it by yourself.
I have a friend whose favorite troll is to make the argument that Game of Thrones is Twilight for boys.
It absolutely is.
Yeah,
It's
men-
just a giant soap opera.
I've
You
seen
use
her
those
do it.
gendered words, and people are like, oh.
I've seen her do it, and it's just it's art.
art.
It's art. It's just having her have this conversation because men get so mad.
So mad. That's my favorite thing, and that's what one of the things I realized in Canada is. I think because I was in such like a, especially in Eugene, Oregon, it's such like a hippy dippy. Everyone's stoned all the time. Super super liberal. I mean, not technically always, but that's the perception, and that's what people portray on the outside. That it's just like I never had to. I like talked the talk for forever, but I never had to walk the walk because I was just with all these people. Like I was in comparative literature classes and public policy classes specifically about bicycle transportation. I would go over to my friend's house and we would make jam for fun while like smoking weed and listening to NPR. Like it was a dream little stupid bubble world.
Yeah.
And then going outside of that to live in like the most conservative province in Canada, like in like the most of the two big cities that are in Alberta, I lived in like the blue collar one, not like the fancy one. So like going out to bars there was like a totally different experience, and people just said things that like people in Eugene, even if you thought it, you wouldn't say it. And then all of a sudden I had to like actually do what I said that I wanted to do for forever, and actually be like, hey, actually that's transphobic, don't say that, and here are the reasons why. And I never had to actually stand up for anything I believed in before, because it was just assumed that everyone felt the same way, and then you just go smoke a joint. It'd be really cool, and you could talk all you wanted about like the issues of the people, but like you weren't experiencing them yourself. But moving there and like actually having to stand up for myself while the election was happening, while living in Canada, which is like a very passive-aggressive country that's just actually just aggressive, and it was, I had to make rules for myself, and one of those rules was like, be intentional about everything, including your media consumption. My time is precious, time on earth is precious, it's not guaranteed, especially now that we could like, you know, be blown up at any minute from all sorts of different sources, whether it's like North Korea or like some pro-life bomber. Like there's so many things that I feel like life is on the edge, and it's really scary that I'm not gonna waste my time like watching Game of Thrones and watching like other things. This is a side note, but one of my favorite Twitter trolls talked about how she likes to call Game of Thrones throne games, and then men will correct her, and she'll just like, they'll be like, oh, Game of Thrones? She's like, yeah, throne games, I love it. And they're like, big Game of Thrones though? She's like, yeah, throne games. What's his name? Jeffrey? Oh, what a kid. I love Jeffrey on throne games. And men are like, but
This is
what?
This is something I do all the time that is like become pathological, and at a certain point I started doing it in college when I was around these guys, right? Who
You have
also
to. You have to.
Yeah, because I started realizing like I wanted to poke and see like how stupid do people really think I am.
Mm-hmm. And
And
how
people-
smart do they think they are?
Yeah.
But they've never had it